I never thought I'd be the kind of person to hold a grudge so tightly it became part of me, like a second heartbeat. But life has a way of carving things into you. And my brother Ethan carved the deepest wound of all. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how I lost my family, found my vengeance, and maybe, just maybe, learned to forgive. It started 5 years ago, in the sterile, buzzing haze of an ICU ward. My daughter, Lily, was 6, her tiny body tethered to machines that beeped like cruel metronomes. Leukemia. The word felt like a blade every time I said it. I was a single mother, scraping by on a teacher's salary, and the hospital bills piled up faster than I could breathe. I was drowning, and I reached out to the one person I thought would understand: Ethan, my older brother, the golden child of our fractured family. He was the successful one, the one who'd made it out of our small Ohio town, with his sleek suits and his corner office in Chicago. I called him, voice shaking, begging for help. "Clara," he said, his voice dripping with that smug amusement he'd perfected. "You really think I'm going to throw money at your mess? You got yourself into this. Figure it out." Then he laughed. A sharp, careless laugh that echoed through the phone and lodged in my chest like shrapnel. He laughed at my ICU bill, at my daughter's life hanging by a thread, at my desperation. I hung up, and something in me broke. That moment changed everything. Lily fought, and so did I. I sold my car, took out loans, worked nights at a diner when I wasn't at the hospital. Friends and strangers donated what they could, and somehow, we pulled through. Lily's cancer went into remission, but the scars it left weren't just on her. They were on me, too, and they festered every time I thought of Ethan's laugh. He didn't call to check on her, didn't send a card, didn't even acknowledge her recovery. He was too busy living his perfect life, posting photos of his lakefront condo, his vacations, his new Mercedes. I watched it all from afar, my anger growing like a weed, wrapping around every thought. I didn't just want him to hurt, I wanted him to feel what I felt. I wanted him to lose something that mattered. It wasn't until a year later that I saw my chance. Ethan had always been careless with his money, flaunting it like a weapon, but I knew he wasn't as untouchable as he seemed. I'd heard whispers from mutual friends that his real estate investments were shaky, that he'd over-leveraged himself to keep up appearances. I started digging. It wasn't hard to find public records, to trace the loans he'd taken out, the properties he'd bought on credit. He was stretched thin, his empire built on sand. I didn't have a plan. Not yet. But I kept watching, waiting for the crack to widen. I told myself it was curiosity, but deep down, I knew it was something darker. I wanted to see him fall. Then came the letter. It was tucked in a stack of junk mail, addressed to me from a lawyer I didn't know. Our mother had died 6 months earlier, and Ethan had handled the estate, or so he claimed. He'd told me there was nothing left, that her medical bills had eaten up everything. But the letter told a different story. Mom had left a small inheritance, a modest sum from the sale of her house, meant to be split between us. Ethan had taken it all. He'd forged documents, convinced the executor she'd changed her will to leave him everything. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the letter, my hands trembling. He hadn't just laughed at my pain had stolen from me, from Lily, from the memory of our mother. That was the moment I decided Ethan would pay. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't even clever. Not in the way he was. But I was patient. And I was angry. And that was enough. I started small, gathering evidence. I contacted the lawyer, quietly, and got copies of the original will, the forged documents, the bank transfers. I didn't confront Ethan, not yet. I wanted him to feel secure, untouchable, right up until the ground gave way beneath him. I spent nights poring over financial records, learning the language of loans and liens. I found out his condo, his pride and joy, was heavily mortgaged, the payments barely covered by his income. One misstep, and the bank would come for it. I just had to find a way to make him miss that step. It was a co-worker at the diner who gave me the idea, though she didn't know it. She was complaining about her ex-husband, how he'd lost his job after a tip to his boss about some shady side deals. I realized Ethan's world was fragile, held together by reputation and cash flow. If I could disrupt either, he'd crumble. I started with his business contacts. Anonymous emails, vague but pointed, hinting at financial troubles, late payments, risky investments. I didn't lie, I just pointed people to the truth, the cracks he'd hidden so well. I watched as his deals started to falter, as investors pulled back. Ethan didn't know it was me, but I could see the strain in his social media posts, the forced smiles, the fewer vacations. Lily noticed the change in me. She was 8 now, sharp as a tack, and she'd catch me staring at my laptop, my face hard. "Mom, why are you always so mad?" she'd ask, her big eyes searching mine. I'd hug her, tell her it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. I was doing this for her. For the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering if she'd live. For the brother who'd turned his back on us. But I was also doing it for me. For the part of me that wanted to hear Ethan beg, the way I'd begged him. By the time I found the final piece, I was ready. A friend of a friend worked at the bank that held Ethan's mortgage. I didn't ask for anything illegal. Just information, his payment history, his missed deadlines. He was already behind. The bank circling like vultures. One call to the right person. One nudge about his forged documents. And the house of cards would fall. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the phone. This was the point of no return. I thought of Lily, of Mom, of that laugh. I made the call. The bank moved faster than I expected. Within weeks, Ethan's condo was in foreclosure. I found out through a mutual friend who called me, shocked, saying Ethan was losing everything. I didn't say much, just listened. But inside, I felt a rush, a dark thrill that scared me as much as it satisfied me. I'd done it. I'd taken something from him, something he loved, the way he'd taken from me. I imagined him standing in that sleek condo, watching movers cart away his furniture, his face crumpling as he realized he wasn't invincible. I wanted to see it, to stand there and laugh the way he had. But I stayed away. I told myself it was enough to know he was suffering. But it wasn't enough. Not really. The victory felt hollow, like biting into something sweet and finding it rotten. I'd spent so long planning, plotting, hating, that when it was over, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd look at Lily, playing in our cramped apartment, and feel a pang of guilt. Was this who I wanted to be? Someone who tore down her own brother, who let anger eat her alive. I pushed the thoughts away, told myself he deserved it. But they kept creeping back, especially at night when the apartment was quiet, and it was just me and my thoughts. Ethan called me a month later. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was different, smaller, broken. "Clara," he said, "I need to see you. Please." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. We met at a coffee shop in Chicago, a neutral place, far from the hospital rooms and the memories that haunted me. He looked older, his face lined, his eyes red. He'd lost weight, his suit hanging loose on his frame. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but then I remembered his laugh, and it hardened me again. He didn't waste time. "I know it was you," he said, his voice low. "The emails, The bank. The will. You did this. I didn't deny it. I just sat there, staring at him, letting him see the woman I'd become. You think you're better than me, he went on, his voice rising. You think you're some kind of hero. You ruined my life. Clara. I leaned forward, my voice steady. You laughed at my daughter's life. You stole from our mother. You don't get to play the victim. He flinched, and for the first time, I saw something in him I hadn't seen before, shame. He told me his side, though I hadn't asked. He'd been drowning too, he said, caught in a web of bad deals and worse decisions. He'd taken Mom's money because he was desperate, because he thought he could turn it around and pay it back. He hadn't laughed to hurt me, he'd laughed because he didn't know how to handle my pain, because he was too weak to face it. I listened, but I didn't soften. Not yet. You could have helped, I said. You could have been my brother. He looked away, and I saw tears in his eyes. I didn't know what to do with that. I went home, and Lily was waiting, her drawings scattered across the table. She'd drawn a picture of us, her and me, holding hands under a big, yellow sun. Where's Uncle Ethan? She asked, and I froze. I hadn't told her much about him, but kids notice things. I mumbled something about him being busy, but her question stuck with me. Ethan had been part of our family once, part of the messy, broken thing we called home. I'd spent so long hating him. I'd forgotten what it felt like to love him. The next few weeks were strange. I kept expecting to feel better, to feel free, but instead, I felt heavier. Ethan's tears kept replaying in my mind, and I hated how they made me question myself. I started looking at old photos, ones from before everything fell apart, Ethan and me as kids, building forts in the backyard, laughing like nothing could touch us. I wondered where that boy had gone, and whether I'd had a hand in killing him. I didn't want to forgive him, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. One night, I got a call from the hospital. Not for Lily, thank God, but for Ethan. He'd been in an accident, a car crash. Nothing fatal, but bad enough to land him in the ER. I didn't want to go, but Lily overheard and begged me. He's family, Mom, she said, and I couldn't argue with that. I drove to the hospital, my heart pounding, not sure what I'd say when I saw him. He was in a bed, bandaged, looking smaller than ever. Clara, he whispered when he saw me, and I could tell he hadn't expected me to come. Neither had I. Sitting by Ethan's hospital bed, I felt like I was in two places at once, part of me still burning with the anger that had driven me for years, and part of me seeing the boy I'd grown up with, bruised and broken. His arm was in a sling, his face swollen, but it was his eyes that hit me hardest. They weren't the eyes of the man who'd laughed at me over the phone. They were scared, vulnerable, like he was waiting for me to finish what I'd started. I didn't say much at first, just sat there, letting the hum of the hospital fill the silence. Lily was at home with a neighbor, and I was glad she wasn't here to see this. She still believed in family, in second chances, in a way I wasn't sure I could anymore. Ethan spoke first. I didn't think you'd come, he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure why I'd come either, except that Lily's words had echoed in my head the whole drive over. He's family, Mom. I almost didn't. I said finally, my voice flat. He nodded, like he'd expected that. I'm sorry, he said, and it caught me off guard. I'd waited years to hear those words, but now that they were here, they felt too small, too late. For what? I asked, sharper than I meant to. He looked down at his hands, one of them wrapped in gauze. For everything. For Lily. For Mom. 4. Laughing. That last word hung in the air. Heavy. Like it carried all the weight of our history. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. The part that remembered him teaching me to ride a bike. Sharing his Halloween candy when I'd eaten all of mine. But the other part, the part that had spent nights plotting his downfall. That had felt the thrill of his foreclosure, didn't trust it. Why now? I asked. Because you're lying here. Because you've lost everything. Or because you mean it. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the ceiling. His jaw tight. I don't know. He said finally. Maybe all of it. I just know I can't keep living like this. I didn't stay long. I told him to get better. Left my number with the nurse. And drove home. But his words stayed with me. Gnawing at the edges of my anger. I'd wanted him to suffer. And he had. I'd wanted him to feel powerless. And he did. So why didn't I feel better? Why did I feel like I'd lost something too? I spent the next few days distracted. Snapping at Lily when she didn't deserve it. Staring at my phone like it might tell me what to do. She noticed. Of course. Are you mad at Uncle Ethan again? She asked one night. Her voice small. I sighed, pulling her into a hug. I'm not sure what I am. I admitted. I started digging again. Not for evidence this time, but for answers. I called the lawyer who'd sent me the letter about Mom's will. Asked if there was any way to reverse what Ethan had done. She said it would be hard. Expensive. Maybe impossible without his cooperation. I didn't know if I wanted to fight that battle, but I kept her number. I also looked into Ethan's accident, piecing together what had happened. He'd been drinking. Not enough to be arrested, but enough to lose control on a wet road. It wasn't the first time. I learned. He'd been spiraling for months. Ever since the foreclosure. I'd pushed him to that edge. And I didn't know how to feel about it. Lily kept asking about him. And I didn't have good answers. Can we visit him? She'd say. And I'd change the subject. But one day, she came home from school with a card she'd made, covered in glitter and crooked hearts. For Uncle Ethan, she said, holding it out to me. I wanted to tell her no, that he didn't deserve her kindness. But I couldn't. She was better than me, better than both of us. So I took her to the hospital, the card clutched in her small hands. Ethan was sitting up this time, looking a little stronger, but still fragile. When he saw Lily, his face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. Hey, kiddo, he said, his voice breaking. She ran to him, handing him the card, and I stood back, watching, my heart caught in my throat. They talked for a while, Lily chattering about school, Ethan listening like it was the most important thing in the world. I didn't join in. I just watched, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the one who'd hurt me so deeply. When we left, Lily hugged him, and he held on a little too long, like he was afraid to let go. In the car, she turned to me. He's sad. Mom, can we help him? I didn't answer, but her words stayed with me, echoing in the quiet moments when I couldn't escape my own thoughts. Lily's question haunted me. Can we help him? I didn't want to help Ethan. I wanted to hold on to my anger, to let it define me, because it was easier than facing the messy truth that he was my brother, that he was human, that he was broken in ways I hadn't seen. But Lily's card, with its glitter and hearts, sat on my kitchen counter, a silent accusation. I couldn't ignore her, couldn't ignore the part of me that still remembered what family meant. So I started small. I called the hospital, checked on Ethan's recovery. He was out of the ICU, but still in bad shape, broken ribs, a concussion, and a long road ahead. I didn't visit, but I sent a care package. Just some basics, socks, a book, a note that said, Get better. I didn't sign it with love. I wasn't there yet. Work was a distraction, but not enough. I'd be grading papers or wiping down tables at the diner, and my mind would drift to Ethan, to the foreclosure, to the will. I'd won, hadn't I? So why did it feel like I was still losing? I started talking to a therapist, someone a friend recommended. I didn't tell her everything, not about the emails, the bank, the revenge, but I told her about Ethan, about Lily, about the anger that had been my fuel for so long. She listened, didn't judge, just asked me what I wanted. I didn't know. I wanted justice, but I'd gotten that. I wanted peace, but I didn't know how to find it. Ethan called again, a week after he was discharged. He was staying in a cheap motel. He said, trying to piece his life back together. Can we talk? He asked. I agreed, but I picked the place our old family home, or what was left of it. It had been sold after Mom died, but the new owners let me walk the grounds sometimes, out of pity or kindness. I met Ethan there, under the big oak tree where we used to play. He looked better, but not much, still thin, still tired. I'm trying to make things right, he said, his hands stuffed in his pockets. I've got a job, a small one. I'm talking to a lawyer about Mom's will. I didn't know if I believed him, but I listened. He told me he'd been selfish, that he'd let his pride and his fear of failure consume him. He didn't ask for forgiveness, not directly, but I could hear it in his voice. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he didn't get to just apologize and make it all go away. But I didn't. I just stood there, the wind rustling the leaves above us, and thought about Lily. What do you want from me? I asked finally. He shrugged, his eyes on the ground. A chance. Maybe. To be your brother again. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. When I got home, Lily was waiting, her eyes bright with questions. Did you see Uncle Ethan? She asked. I nodded, and she smiled, like that was enough. I envied her, the way she could love without keeping score. I started thinking about what Ethan had said, about making things right. I called the lawyer again, asked what it would take to split Mom's inheritance the way she'd wanted. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about honoring her, about undoing what Ethan had done. The lawyer said it would take time, but it was possible, especially if Ethan cooperated. I didn't know if he would, but I had to try. I started writing to Ethan, not calls or visits, but letters. Short ones. At first, just updates about Lily, about my life. I didn't mention the will, didn't mention the past. I just wrote, and he wrote back. His letters were tentative, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. He told me about his job, a low-level position at a construction firm, nothing like his old life. He told me about his therapy, about the guilt he carried. I didn't know if I trusted it, but I kept writing, because it felt like something, maybe not forgiveness, but a step toward it. Lily started asking to see him more, and I couldn't keep saying no. So we invited him over, just for dinner. Nothing big. He showed up with a small gift for Lily, a stuffed bear, and she hugged him like he'd never done anything wrong. Watching them together, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was softer than hate. We ate. We talked. And for a moment, it felt like we were a family again. But I knew it wouldn't be that easy. There were still wounds. Still questions. Still a long way to go. Dinner with Ethan was a start. But it didn't erase the past. I'd catch myself watching him, looking for signs of the old Ethan, the one who'd laughed, who'd stolen, who'd let me down. He was trying. I could see that. He'd show up with small gifts for Lily, help with dishes, ask about my day like he cared. But trust is a fragile thing, and mine was still in pieces. I kept writing to him, though, and he kept writing back. His letters got longer, more honest. He told me about the nights he'd spent awake, hating himself for what he'd done to us. He told me about Mom, how he justified taking her money because he thought he could make it grow, make her proud. It didn't excuse him, but it made him human, and that was harder to hate. Lily was the bridge between us. She'd talk about Ethan like he was a hero, not a villain, and I didn't have the heart to correct her. She'd draw him pictures, ask him to read her stories, and he'd do it with a patience I didn't remember him having. One night, she fell asleep on the couch, her head on his shoulder, and I saw something in his face: regret. Maybe. Or hope. I don't deserve this, he said quietly, looking at her. I know, I said, but my voice wasn't as hard as it used to be. The lawyer called with good news. Ethan had signed over his share of Mom's inheritance. No fight. No excuses. The money wasn't much, but it was enough to pay off some of Lily's old medical bills, to give us a little breathing room. I didn't thank him. Not directly, but I felt the weight of it. He was trying to make things right, and I had to decide if I'd let him. I started inviting him over more, not just for Lily, but for me. I wanted to see if we could rebuild something, if we could be a family again. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I'd look at him and hear that laugh, feel that old anger flare up. But I'd think of Lily, of Mom, and I'd push it down. One day, Ethan showed up with a folder of papers. I've been looking into something, he said, his voice nervous. Inside were documents about a community center in our old neighborhood, one that had been struggling since Mom died. She'd volunteered there, taught sewing classes, helped kids with homework. Ethan wanted to use his share of the inheritance, what was left of it, keep it open. I know it's not enough, he said, but it's a start. For her. I didn't know what to say. It was the first time I'd seen him do something without expecting anything in return. We went to the center together, Lily tagging along, her eyes wide at the old building with its peeling paint and creaky floors. Ethan talked to the director, offered what he could, and I saw the way people looked at him, not with pity, but with respect. I realized then that he was changing, not just for me or Lily, but for himself. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was close. I started volunteering at the center too, teaching a few classes, helping where I could. It felt good, like I was honoring Mom in a way I hadn't before. Lily loved the center. She'd run around, helping the younger kids, her laughter filling the space. Ethan would watch her, and I'd see that same look on his face: regret, hope, love. One day, he pulled me aside. I'm not asking you to forget, he said. I just want to be better. For her. For you. I didn't answer, but I nodded, and that was enough for him. We kept working together, not just at the center, but on us. It was slow, painful, full of missteps, but it was something. I started to see Ethan differently, not as the brother who'd betrayed me, but as someone who was trying to claw his way back. He wasn't perfect. He'd snap sometimes, or retreat into silence when things got hard. But he kept showing up, and that counted for something. I kept writing to him, and he kept writing back. And slowly, the letters became less about the past and more about the future. We talked about Lily, about Mom, about what we wanted our family to be. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and that was a start. The community center became our anchor, a place where Ethan and I could be together without the weight of the past crushing us. Lily loved it there, and her joy was contagious, softening the edges of my anger. I'd watch her run through the halls, her laughter echoing, and I'd see Ethan smile in a way that reminded me of our childhood. He was different now, not completely, but enough that I noticed. He'd stay late to fix a leaky sink, or spend hours helping a kid with math, and I'd catch myself thinking he wasn't the same man who'd laughed at me. But the past wasn't gone. It lingered, like a bruise you only feel when you press it. One night, after a long day at the center, Ethan and I sat on the steps outside, sharing a coffee. Lily was inside, painting with the other kids, her hands covered in blue and red. "I keep waiting for you to hate me again," Ethan said, his voice low. I looked at him, surprised. "I don't hate you," I said, and it was true, though I hadn't realized it until I said it. "But I don't trust you." "Not completely." He nodded, like he'd expected that. "Fair," he said. "I'm still earning it." We started talking more, not just about Mom or Lily, but about everything. He told me about his life in Chicago, the pressure to keep up appearances, the fear of failing. I told him about the nights I'd spent in the hospital, praying Lily would make it, hating him for not being there. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and it felt like we were finally seeing each other, not as enemies, but as people who'd been hurt. I didn't tell him about the emails, the foreclosure, the revenge. I wasn't ready, and I didn't know if I ever would be. But I told him enough, and he listened, and that was something. Lily kept us grounded. She'd drag Ethan into her games, make him draw with her, and he'd do it, even when he was tired. I saw the way he looked at her, like she was his second chance, and I wondered if she was mine too. One day, she asked if Ethan could come to her school play, and I said yes before I could overthink it. He showed up, dressed in a cheap suit, holding a bouquet of daisies for her. She beamed, and I felt something loosen inside me, something I'd been holding onto for too long. The lawyer called again, said the paperwork for Mom's inheritance was almost done. Ethan had signed everything. No hesitation. The money would come soon, enough to clear the last of Lily's bills and maybe start a small college fund. I didn't thank him, but I felt it, and I think he knew. We were building something, not the family we'd had, but something new. It was fragile, but it was real. One night, after Lily was asleep, I found an old photo album in a box I hadn't opened in years. Pictures of me and Ethan as kids, of Mom, of birthdays and summers and moments I'd forgotten. I sat there, flipping through it, and felt an ache in my chest, not anger, but longing. I wanted that family back, but I knew we couldn't go back. We could only go forward. I called Ethan, told him about the album, and he asked if he could see it. We met at the diner, late, when it was quiet, and we looked through the photos together, laughing at some, crying at others. It was then that I told him. Not everything, but enough. I pushed the bank to foreclose. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I sent the emails. I wanted you to hurt. He looked at me, his face unreadable, and for a moment, I thought he'd walk away. But he didn't. I know, he said finally. I figured it out a while ago. I deserved it. I didn't expect that. I'd expected anger, denial, anything but acceptance. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. He shrugged, his eyes on the photo of us as kids, smiling under that oak tree. Because I wanted to fix this. And I couldn't do that if I fought you. I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so long hating him, planning his downfall, that I didn't know how to handle his grace. We sat there, the album between us, and I realized something. I didn't want to be the person who'd done those things anymore. I wanted to be better. For Lily. For Mom. For myself. Ethan's admission changed something in me. I'd expected a fight, a chance to justify myself. But his quiet acceptance took that away. It left me with nothing but my own reflection. And I didn't like what I saw. I told myself I was fighting for justice. For Lily. For Mom. But part of it had been for me. For the satisfaction of seeing him suffer. I wasn't proud of that. I didn't tell Ethan. But I started to wonder if I'd been wrong, not about what he'd done, but about what I'd become. We kept working at the community center, and it became our neutral ground. A place where we could be Clara and Ethan, not the betrayed and the betrayer. Lily loved it there, and her presence made it easier to focus on the present, not the past. Ethan was good with the kids, patient in a way I hadn't expected. He'd sit with them, help with their homework, tell stories about Mom that made them laugh. I'd watch him, and I'd see glimpses of the brother I'd loved, the one I'd lost. One day, the director of the center asked if we'd help organize a fundraiser. The building needed repairs, and they were short on funds. Ethan jumped at the chance, like it was his lifeline. I agreed, mostly for Lily, who was excited about the idea of a big party. We spent weeks planning. Ethan handled the logistics. I worked on outreach, and Lily made posters covered in glitter. It was the first time we'd worked together like this, like a team, and it felt strange but good. The night of the fundraiser, the center was packed, kids running around, music playing, the air thick with hope. Ethan gave a speech, short and simple, about Mom, about what the center meant to her. I saw people wipe tears, and I felt them in my own eyes. After, we sat outside, exhausted but happy. Lily was asleep inside, curled up on a beanbag. This is what she would have wanted, Ethan said, looking at the stars. I nodded, my throat tight. She loved this place, I said. She loved us. We didn't say more, but we didn't need to. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side. The money from Mom's inheritance came through, and I used it to pay off the last of Lily's medical bills. It wasn't a fortune, but it was freedom. A weight lifted. I told Ethan, and he smiled. A real smile, not the smug one I remembered. I'm glad, he said. It's what she wanted. I didn't thank him, but I didn't need to. He knew. We started talking more about the future, about what we wanted for Lily, for ourselves. He was still at the motel, still scraping by, but he was trying, and I respected that. Lily's school play came around, and Ethan was there, front row, daisies in hand. She was a tree, waving her arms in a green costume, and she was perfect. After, we went for ice cream, the three of us, and it felt normal, like something we could do again. I caught Ethan watching me, like he was waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. I wasn't ready to call it forgiveness, but it was close enough. I started therapy again, not just to talk about Ethan, but to talk about me. I told the therapist about the revenge, about the emails, the foreclosure, all of it. She didn't judge, just listened, and helped me see that I'd been carrying my anger like a shield, protecting me from pain, but also from healing. I didn't want to let it go. Not completely, but I wanted to be more than my anger. I wanted to be the mother Lily deserved, the sister Ethan needed, the daughter Mom would have been proud of. Ethan and I kept writing letters, even though we saw each other often. It was our way of being honest, of saying things we couldn't say out loud. In one, he wrote, I don't expect you to forget, but I hope you'll give me a chance to be better. I wrote back, I'm trying. And I was. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The fundraiser was a turning point, not just for the community center, but for us. The money we raised kept the lights on, fixed the roof, and gave the kids a place to belong. Ethan and I kept volunteering, and it became our routine, our way of rebuilding what we'd lost. Lily was the heart of it, her laughter filling the gaps where our words fell short. She'd run to Ethan, hug him, call him Uncle Ethan like it was the easiest thing in the world. I envied her that, but I was learning from her, too. One afternoon, as we were cleaning up after a class, Ethan pulled me aside. "I'm moving," he said. My stomach dropped, thinking he was leaving, running away again. But he shook his head, seeing my face. "Not far. Just an apartment nearby. It's small, but it's mine." He'd been saving, working overtime, rebuilding his life one step at a time. I felt a flicker of pride, mixed with something softer. "That's good," I said, and I meant it. We started spending more time together, not just at the center, but as a family. Sunday dinners, walks in the park, movie nights with Lily sprawled across the couch. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I'd catch myself waiting for him to slip, to prove he hadn't changed. But he kept showing up, and slowly, I started to trust him. Not completely, but enough to let him back into our lives. One night, Lily asked if Ethan could come to her birthday party. She was turning 9, and she wanted a big celebration at the center. I said yes, and we planned it together, Ethan, Lily, and me. The day of the party, the center was alive with kids, balloons, and music. Ethan brought a cake he'd made himself, lopsided but covered in Lily's favorite sprinkles. She hugged him so hard I thought she'd never let go. Watching them, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Later, after the kids had gone home and Lily was asleep, Ethan and I sat in the quiet center, picking up stray streamers. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice low. "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For giving me a chance," he said. "For letting me be part of this." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so long fighting him, hating him, that I hadn't realized how much I'd needed him too. "Your family," I said finally, echoing Lily's words. He smiled, and I saw the boy from the photos, the one I'd loved before everything fell apart. I didn't tell him I forgave him, not in so many words, but I didn't need to. He saw it in the way I let him stay, the way I let him love Lily, the way I let him love me. We kept writing letters, but they were different now, less about guilt and more about hope. In one, I wrote, "I'm glad you're here." He wrote back, "I'm glad you let me stay." Years later, I'd look back and realize that was the moment we became a family again. Not the one we'd been, but the one we'd built, piece by painful piece. Ethan never got his condo back, never got his old life back, but he didn't need it. He had us, and we had him. Lily grew up knowing her uncle, not as a villain, but as a man who'd made mistakes and tried to make them right. I don't know if I ever fully forgave Ethan, not in the way people talk about in books or movies. But I let go of the anger, let it slip away like sand through my fingers. I didn't laugh when the bank foreclosed on his mortgage. Not really. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something: satisfaction. Maybe. Or justice. It wasn't enough to heal me, but it was enough to start. The rest came from Lily, from Ethan, from the slow, messy work of rebuilding. And in the end, that was enough.